Attention, you're listening to The Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. Be advised, the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. And now, coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, here's your conservative but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Greetings, everybody, and welcome to the Todd Huff Radio Show, the home of conservative, not bitter. This is your guest host, Krish Dunham, filling in for Todd once again. Usually there is a gap between the 2 or 3 times a year he asks me to fill in for him. So this is slightly unusual that I was just with you guys a couple of weeks ago. Welcome again to all the listeners who have faithfully listened to this show, both in its origins and then in the add-on of new markets. It is great to see how Todd has flourished from the early days to now, having this organized forum that seems to be reaching masses through his Toddcast and through other things, being able to deliver a sound message of conservatism that, as the moniker itself states, is conservative, not bitter. I have always been a gratitude person. I have had my fits of lunacy, I guess, and my bouts of anger when I see different things that happen. But the last couple of times we were together, I shared the gratitude, why America still matters. I took you through the chronicles, and I was really grateful for how Todd capsulizes or encapsulates everything, using a big word. And so to reintroduce myself, again, this is Krish Dunham, your humble immigrant correspondent. I've lived in the United States for now 40 years. I had the rare privilege of working with the great legendary motivator, Mr. Zig Ziglar, have had a chance to write books, curriculum, travel the globe as an evangelist, as a corporate speaker, setting up franchises. And I think if I look at my own footprint now, it has now amassed roughly 80 countries on 6 continents. So it's not bad for an American dream that began with $9 and looking at the early days coming into New York and then eventually moving to Texas and making this our home. My current assignment is I'm the Dean of the Patriot Institute at the Patriot Academy in Fredericksburg, Texas, or actually Comfort, Texas. And we have a campus there where I have the rare luxury of teaching young Americans the civic process, early American history, etc., etc. Not to bore you with my resume or force you to do things that you didn't come to listen to do. The website is patriotacademy.com. You can check that out. We're affiliated with David Barton and Wall Builders, so that's where the history comes from. And my love for this nation was birthed steeply into my dear friend Rick Green, who asked me to walk alongside him 25 years ago and start using my speaking skills for the young audiences that we were impacting. So check out Patriot Academy. We train young people on the art and the science of speaking. We talk about the different elements of the psychology of progression, the philosophy of understanding, the anthropology of believing. We deal with apologetics. We talk about worldviews and all of those things. So today I want to just have some fun. Argue a little bit about some of the things that we are seeing on the horizon that are dangerous. Maybe tomorrow or the next time I'm with you, I'm been asked by Todd to do a couple of days. We'll tackle this issue of Islam once again because it is a rising threat, it is a growing threat, and as the left likes to use with everything they do, it is an existential threat. Of course, most of the left's existential threats are just nonsense. So follow me on, I have a YouTube channel that is fairly small because it just grows with whoever goes and watches it. I guess I don't promote it and I don't do ads and all that. I have a Substack where you can go and read some of the things I write. I recently started writing under the pen of the new Colossus. the Statue of Liberty being the new Colossus, the Colossus of Rhodes being the old Colossus, as Emma Lazarus articulated. And so under the new Colossus, I've got some really simple articles that are seem to be evoking an interest that borders are not bigoted, principles are not prejudiced, and sovereignty is not a sin. But one of the articles I wrote was called the left's or the Lariat of Lunacy. Lariat is just a grown-up word for a lasso or something that is used to rope animals. But I like alliteration, so when I looked at lunacy and I looked at the left and I thought about all the things they're trying to rope in, I thought the lariat would be something that would just fit my alliterative desire and more importantly have some fun with it. So there are 10 or 12 common positions that the left has adopted, and I want to look at some of these and try to just have some fun and look at the lunacy of them. Now, I know Todd will do a better job of looking at the entire recording or hearing the recording and then trying to pull out the salient points, and we'll pull the definitions where they come. But this is just me opining. Now, those of you who have listened to me a while or a minute, you know that I'm just a first generation immigrant. I'm humbled. I'm grateful to be here. I'm honest about the fact that I was given a privilege to come to America. I make no bones about the fact that this is the greatest land on planet Earth. The rest was just a package deal. In fact, yesterday and day before, I was in Pennsylvania at a church in New Cumberland and brought to them the history of America, more importantly, trying to place a lot of America's evolution on Ben Franklin and some of his early writings. More importantly, the fact that he signed both the Declaration and the Constitution. But I brought up this fact that, one of the things that the left likes to throw about is that America was not a Judeo-Christian country. Now, it may not be a Judeo-Christian country in the way you identify going to church, being a progressive evangelical and a Bible thumper of some kind and having discipleship meetings every day and all of that. But if you look at some of the things that Ben Franklin, for example, said, it's quite fascinating. And I brought this up yesterday, said that, you know what, Ben Franklin, by all practical senses, was a deist, I guess. And I brought this up in Pennsylvania, which was his home. And then I also brought up the fact that Ben Franklin, for being a deist, actually had a church. I think he had a church membership of some kind because the Franklin had a pew in Christ Church in Pennsylvania, and the pew number that was allocated to the Franklin family was number 70. George Washington worshipped there when he could. Betsy Ross did. So Franklin may have never gone to the church, but his family went there, and other people were baptized there and all that. But Ben Franklin actually had a pew there. In his biography, he writes about his long-standing relationship with George Whitefield, the great evangelist. And they disagreed on George Whitefield believed in the divine, the sovereign, the one and only Son of God. And Franklin was a little more open, believing in the moralist teachings that were valid. But in his biography, Franklin writes quite candidly that, as he spoke and I felt I needed to give something, initially I grasped in my pocket a couple of coins, then a little more, and by the time he finished, I gave him all the money I had. Franklin was notoriously known for having done some of the early printing and, in fact, probably may have printed most of Whitefield's sermons in the New Thing. All this to say that Franklin, even though he was an unbeliever, had a remarkable affiliation with believers. But here's the most important part. He stands up on June 22nd, 1787, when the Constitutional Congress they're trying to ratify the Constitution. The Declaration has happened. 1783, they've signed the treaty in Paris. America is well on her way to understanding its new fledgling republic. And they are stuck on a few points, slavery being one of them. But Franklin stands up, and here's a deist, a man who truly may not have ever believed in the divinity of the Lord Jesus Christ, says this. I have lived, sir, a long time, and the longer I live, the more convincing proofs I see of this truth that God governs in the affairs of men. And if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without his notice, is it probable that an empire can rise without his aid? We have been assured, sir, in the sacred writings that except the Lord build a house, they labor in vain and build it. I firmly believe this, and I also believe that without his conquering aid, we shall succeed in his political building no better than the builders of Babel. And I thought to myself, man, and that's what I told the church audience. I said, man, I would take that day's unbelief of this over this day's belief. Isn't that fascinating? So I just wanted to bring that up because sometimes when I speak in secular settings, I'm always given this accusation that is attached to my messaging that, oh, you're coming at it from a right wing, conservative Christian perspective. No, I'm coming at it from an American perspective. Whether you want to believe that the Congregationalists and the Anabaptists and the Methodists and the centrists all could get together or not is entirely your privilege. But when 56 men signed that Declaration of Independence, I'm pretty sure they had a belief in something, and that belief in something was from within. That's when I told the folks in Pennsylvania, I think it's a travesty that every American household in the year 2026 doesn't have a copy of the New England Primer that was published by Benjamin Harris in the late 1600s, that every first grader had to memorize. But all that to say, to give a little preamble to my own constitution, I guess, I'm going to deal with a few of the liberal lunacy lariats, which is what are they trying to lasso with their stupidity? Now, when I plugged that into ChatGPT and I said, can you give me some indefensible lunatic liberal positions? ChatGPT said, well, maybe calling them liberal is okay, but calling them leftist is okay, but calling them lunatic may not be the right thing. So even ChatGPT was trying to give me a caution that don't go over the deep end. And this is fascinating because I'm pretty sure at some fiber of their being, they actually believe this nonsense. Because as a conservative, when I look at some of their positions, I think to myself, no sane person who wakes up every morning can even fathom for a second that that is a position worth having for anybody, leave alone as a cause. Don't even get me started on this new democratic socialist nonsense, and maybe we'll deal with that some other day. But here's one: defunding or radically reducing policing. Arguing that traditional policing should be replaced by social service responses in many situations. I do not know if these people understand what is the rule of law. I don't know if they think that, anybody can monitor anybody is just dumb. That's letting the inmates run the asylum. Where do people go? In fact, when one of the democratic socialist activists or whatever, I mean, it's not hard to spot them because as soon as they open their mouth, lunacy spews. But this person got up and they looked educated. They looked fairly composed. They were not like the rabid lunatics you see with the purple hair and the weird signs and the weird clothes and the weird get-ups, carrying mannequins and protesting everything. These people are actually put together, and that's why they're having such phenomenal success even within their own party. So that's a whole different issue. But the Democratic Socialists got up and said something to the effect of, yeah, I don't think we need to radically eliminate police or reduce it, or if not completely get away with it and go back to some kind of a community policing like we did in the old days, or whatever her nonsense was. But the question asked by the host was simple. He said, what if my own child was either killed or, God forbid, raped and killed? Uh, how does the punishment work in that? What do we do with the person who did the crime? We may never catch them because we won't want a police department, but if we do catch them, you also want prison reform in that there has to be a bunch of things that are what you call cashless bail and all this other nonsense. I love her response. At least she was honest. See, they don't have a clue. It just sounds good. It's a utopia. It sounds very fascinating that if we did this and went to it to its logical extreme, it will generate that paradise. Her answer didn't shock me. I was very, very grateful that I knew what her answer would be. She said, I'm not here to take straw man positions, which means I only want her to cater to the norm, not the exceptions. I want you to hold on to that thought for a second. I want you to cater to the norm. Well, majority of time this doesn't happen. Majority of time people are peaceful. 97% of the time people can leave their door open and not get busted. Let's not worry about the 3% of time when they leave their door open and do get broken into. Let's cater to the norm. See, percentile arguments are very fascinating because the majority of the time nothing happens. We have these extraneous circumstances built into legality for a reason. The extraneous circumstances are what warrant the time after committing the crime. You can go through your house and take anything from any cupboard. It's your house. You can go through your house and rifle through your wife's purse or your husband's wallet and may get away with it. And at the end of the day, when you talk to them, you say, hey, I took a few bucks. Hey, okay, yeah, next time tell me so I'm not caught short-handed when I'm on the road, whatever it is, a reconciliation. But just because you do that in your house, you just can't now automatically parlay it and say, I'm going to go to the store, take a few items off the shelf because I didn't have them. That's what this lunacy is proposing. Well, if you have it, it's kind of it's one way. But if you don't have it, we need to include them in having it. This is when the congresswoman from New York, who is considered a forerunner for the 28 election, and I'm telling you, nothing will shock me, nothing will surprise me if the show goes on as I probably suppose it will, and Todd and I'm still around in 2028, which I prayerfully hope I will be. And Todd asked me to come back. We may be addressing issues in the 2028 election or after the 2026 that we never even saw coming. But that's the reality of the world. That's the ignorance, the leftist lariat. They have constantly lassoed common sense. In fact, in that article on Substack, I wrote that when you go to a rodeo, the horse and the calf don't go through a meeting saying that did I give you a head start? Should we run even? Should we both gang up together and question the cowboy's motives? The clown in the barrel is never in charge of anything. But that's where we are right now. The horse and the calf are now talking about what they need to do about the cowboy's intent in an activity created by the cowboy, and the clown is the one who's going to call the shots. That's a tongue in cheek reference, but that's what lunacy actually is. The other is abolishing immigration enforcement. They said we just need to have open borders. It doesn't really matter. Now, I'll take a sidebar here. I'm from India. I'm a first generation migrant. I came into this country legally. I went through the process. I was processed for about 2 hours in the New York airport of John F. Kennedy before I was allowed to get out into the country. I had to produce a police clearance. I had to produce a medical clearance. I had to get all kinds of things to not only tell them that I was willing to come here, but I was willing to be scrutinized completely just for the privilege. In addition to that, I was only given $20 on a one-on-one visa, so I couldn't flood this country with money. When you look at the modern money that is flowing within Islamic neighborhoods and Indian neighborhoods, it's untold amount of wealth is being brought in that is not taxed, that is not scrutinized, and these people have an unfair advantage. They have an unfair advantage because the average American who's doing everything right doesn't have those advantages. How then can you say that a person comes here and within 3 years they are living in a $500,000 house in one of the prettiest parts of town? They're driving a car worth about 80 grand and they've got a 30-year mortgage even though they have a 3-year visa. Someone is scamming the system and someone is not owning up to it. Now, we can pacify ourselves around this and dance a death of a thousand qualifications, but as I told the church yesterday, I said, as a good Christian, if I'm going to not be bitter, I have to realize that Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth are in my cul-de-sac. And if I want to confront them, I need to actually first find a way to love them enough so that I can share the gospel with them. That's my heart's desire. But there's no way around this lunacy, as I'm starting to see, and as the great Rush Limbaugh said, there'll come a time when we are just to the point we're looking at ourselves, we're scratching our head and said, you know what? As mad as I am about all of this, I have to admit I let this happen on my watch. Abolishing immigration enforcement, opposing detention, deportation, or significant border enforcement. The numbers that President Trump or the numbers that are attributed to President Trump are far fewer than those that are attributed to President Obama. But isn't that fascinating? That's the left's Lariat of Lunacy. When you bring up President Obama's policies that actually did more harm in the separation of whatever it is, the immediate reaction again is that straw man argument. Well, we're not here to talk about what happened 8 years ago because we weren't around then. Yeah, you were 8. You're 16 now. You don't have a great amount of worldview just because you feel different. Uh, of course, gender and all that, we've talked about that. Race conscious government policies, supporting racial preferences on differential treatment to achieve particular equity outcomes. This is a lunatic position. This is where they, again, the lasso of lunacy. I do not even know how we arrived at that point where you could say that one race is preferred over another race because of a grievance that is now 200 years old. Okay, let's peel that onion and hope see we find a diamond, but I'm pretty sure all we're going to get is tears. Anything in corporate training, we say an overextension of a strength becomes a weakness. If DEI is your strength, diversity, equity, inclusion is your strength, every part of your meetings are controlled on that narrative. Guess what? Eventually, it'll become a weakness. It'll become a weakness because you will have only brought in a collective group of people from the lowest common denominator of qualification. Which means what you said, in order to be included, I have to change the rules of engagement. You know, the truth is, fairness and equality are a myth. Fairness means people are saying that just let me play the game, and some people are prevented from that. Equality is like change the rules so I win the game. Reality is quite different. But when I've asked people all over the world, do you want fairness or equality? A majority of them say, 99% will say fairness, just let me play the game. So this whole concept of race conscious policies just definitely don't gel because at some point that strength will become a weakness. Government mandated speech or compelled language. This is what the democratic socialists want. This is what the liberal left wants. But if you look at saying to ourselves as we're listening to this in the comfort of wherever we are, oh, that won't happen in America. We have the First Amendment. Well, the First Amendment and the Constitution and everything that we framed here was a byproduct of the Magna Carta that was the first threat that the first tenet that was offered when the Magna Carta in, I think, 1200 or something like that, where they said, you know, the king cannot have separate rules and the peasant cannot have separate rules. So they created something called equality. Uh, our free speech comes from that. We have a right to speak our mind. We have a right to speak our thoughts. Hate speech is not free speech. Hate speech laws are different, but technically, free speech trumps any speech. Otherwise, we're sunk. That's the very First Amendment. But here we are. In England, a woman gets jailed for posting a Facebook post. That's happening in America too. People are fired. We went through the cancel culture. And all of these things happen because of that. The government mandated speech and compel language. What's good for you is good for you. What's good for me is good for me. But if I deem that what's good for you is not good, then I can make that decision. So I'm going to give you an insurance program that you can live with, but I'm not going to be forced to live with that program. So these are just some of the left's lariat of lunacy, and I'm going to go through a few more. I'm just having fun today. Hope you're having it as well. More after the break. Welcome back, dear friends. This is your humble host, Krish Dunham, filling in for my dear friend Todd Huff on the home of Conservative Not Bitter. Thank you for putting up with my musings and ramblings as I went through a litany of things that I consider the left's lariat of lunacy. Just to give you an old cowboy term from this Indian, a lariat is just a lasso. When I wrote the article, I was comparing the American experiment to a rodeo and said that if you allowed the lunatics of the left in a rodeo, they would go to the wrong side. They wouldn't marvel at the speed of the horse, the agility of the cowboy, the evasing maneuvers of the calf, the technique of the roping, the humor of the clown, which is all done for entertainment, where you bring spectacle in a splendid way. I've been to many a rodeo, and I always marvel at how they go from a dead gallop into a drop, and it's just amazing how they do it. But if you gave the lefts the control of the rodeo, First Peter would make sure that the horse and the calf had a conversation about equality and rights. The cowboy would be sent to sensitivity training and be asked to explain his affinity for beef and other meat products. The clown would be put in charge, and the more ridiculous he dressed, probably the more prominence he would get. So that was the genesis of it. And then I asked ChatGPT, give me a couple of tenets on the left's lariat of lunacy. And ChatGPT asked me to be a little more sensitive and say, don't call it lunatic, call it fringe, call it whatever. So I'm just having fun today because I'm thinking to myself, artificial intelligence will never be a substitute for natural stupidity. And I think that's going to be the test of the next 5 or 6 years. Oh man, to wish the great Ronald Reagan or the great Rush Limbaugh were here to see these times where communication has just gone completely nuts. Nobody can say what they are feeling. Everybody is on about something else. Well, replacing capitalism wholesale is the big issue of the moment right now. That's what the democratic socialists want. In this segment, I want to tackle that, which is I came to America because it was capitalist. I wonder why all these migrants come here. Dearborn, Michigan, that's going up in flames right now with people fighting on all sides, or the Somali migrants who were repatriated, or the Haitian people who are now debating their temporary protection status. I wonder why they were all repatriated to capitalistic environments. If their countries were so bad and capitalism is so evil, how come none of them wanted to go to Soviet Union or to Cuba? I think Cuba is closer to Haiti than it is to Ohio. It's fascinating, isn't it? They want America to rescue them, but then they want America's rescue to be on their terms, replacing capitalism wholesale. There's a guy who does some kind of financial advice, and he uses some crass language. I'm not going to give you his name. But one of the reels that came across, he basically pointed out and said, which country would you move to where your concept of socialism has worked? He said, that's not the point. You think it's that easy? You think we'll just get up? I love it here. Then what are you complaining about? Well, the top 1% don't pay their fair share. Well, do you realize how much the top 1% pay? Do you know how much the top 50% pay? Do you know how that the bottom 50 don't pay anything? She said that can't be true. Interesting. Look at her words. She didn't say that's not true. She said that can't be true because she's built her whole narrative that someone's greed is the reason for this, her position, for her place, for her situation. Someone is always It's always someone else's fault. I find that it's laughable that you want to remove capitalism as a front. So in our Patriot Academy, if you walked in a Patriot Academy and there was a group of our kids there, or any of our leadership congresses, and just said the word out loud, socialism, immediately you'll be greeted with an anthem that is an echo that everyone in unison will say. Bad. Very, very bad. To which I have added, and I think our kids have picked up, communism is worse, much, much worse. So these democratic socialists, I don't even know what that means, a democratic socialist of America. America was created as a concept. The fact that 250 years ago we even had the word socialist attributed. I mean, my God, we're only about 50 or 60 years removed from the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis and only about 35 years removed from the end of the Cold War. Russian socialism collapsed and all of Eastern Europe fell because people were tired. And when their liberations began in Hungary and in Poland and in the Czech Republic and all of Eastern Europe, Albania, Romania. I've been to all of these countries and I've gone to the square where the freedom revolution began and the despot who was ruling their country was overthrown. My God, that was 1990, 89, 90. So you had 10 years there and you had another 26 years. We had 35 years removed, less than a biblical generation. And you've got these knuckleheads saying, I think we need to have some kind of a socialism where healthcare is free. And well, we tried that healthcare is free, didn't we? It was wonderful as long as there were subsidies. Now, I pay a huge premium because my wife has a pre-existing condition. I'm going to probably get on this Medicare and find out that that's not free either. And because I may be on the right side of having made money as a capitalist, I don't think Medicare is going to be that helpful for me. I hope it will be. I hope the numbers add up because I'm looking forward to getting back something from the system. But the goal was never to get back something from the system. The goal was always to give something to the system that others who couldn't would benefit. That's the trade-off. I'm not a mean person to the degree that I don't want my tax dollars to go to not help anybody and just help me. But it's crazy to imagine that everybody needs everything for free. Where is the money going to come from? Who are they going to take it? And who's the favorite whipping boy on this? Oh, well, the rich. How did that work out in New York? And how well is working out in Florida where they have fled? The man in New York who wants everything to be a socialist utopia. He's promised the grocery stores that will be state funded and they will cost 30% less. I mean, again, I'm laughing because the economics do not add up. They never will, they never have. These are parallel lines that won't meet, except you have some nimbus hoping that if they straddle the parallel lines, the electricity that will create a new thing. Let's have government grocery stores that are going to be stocked with the basic provisions and 30% less, which means you're going to subsidize that because someone is going to have to give a cut. Now, let's say that the 30% subsidy is only for government people, and if you're a private grocery store, you can buy your groceries for 30% less. Well, the government is going to figure out a way to get it for less by levying more taxes on the other or not levying taxes on something. It's not a zero-sum game. They're going to figure out a way. Well, here's the problem. The discrimination will begin because if you're a righteous person on the right side of gravity and you're a smart person on the right side of capitalism, wouldn't you want to buy your stuff in a 30% cheaper grocery store? Then you get save 30% of your money, invest more, and become richer. Oh, no, they're not going to allow billionaires and millionaires to come into the show. How are they going to prevent them? Oh, we're going to have an ID. Oh, yeah? Oh, I thought you didn't like IDs. I thought IDs disenfranchise poor people. Now you want the poor people to go get an ID so they can get groceries for less, so that you can say that you provided groceries to everybody and put food on the table, but you were subsidizing them the same way we subsidized healthcare. 10 years will go by and someone will figure out that this was about as dumb an idea as anything else on the planet. And sure enough, the subsidies will go away and the food prices will skyrocket just when you've trained people that they can get their beef and their, well, maybe we won't have to worry about meat because I'm guessing most of these people will just be vegans and vegetarians and environmentally conscious people, sowing their own hemp and weaving weaving their own coir. I guess I'm just getting punch drunk nuts right now in terms of, uh, the word that was used by the British. You get punch drunk when you see imbecility and your brain kind of goes into a warp mode. Maybe someday when I'm getting ready to write my last book, I'm going to write, I told you so, duh, and just name names at that point. So, anyhow, I just was thinking to myself when I look at this concept of open borders and government mandated speech and replacing capitalism wholesale, I often wonder how you would sit in a room and actually make a case for this and actually fill a room with people. Fill a room with people who are 9 degrees removed from some kind of a major meltdown because something happened. You know, one thing I love about this country is it allows everybody to come here and it gives even ignorance the greatest of platform. One thing I'm beginning to doubt about this country is if that freedom went so unfettered and so unchecked for such a long period of time that now the very fools who have been proposing these idiotic and very stupid policies are actually in positions of power. Look at the mayors of some of the big cities of America, including New York, and ask yourself, would you have ever dreamt that this day was possible? More after the break. Welcome back to the home of Conservative Not Bitter, the Todd Huff radio show. This is your humble host, Krish Dunham, filling in for my dear friend Todd Huff. We've just been doing some musings and rantings, having some punch drunk moments. Notice I used punch because I don't drink, but punch drunk moments and trying to look at something through the lens of the Lariat of Lunacy, the lasso of lunacy. How liberals astride their horses are forcing this incredible nightmare on the American people and how the left are now having to sit up and say, hey, you know what? I think all the really weird horses have run out of the barn, and we need to corral them back because the left, which thought that they were, which I thought was nuts enough, have now ceded to the democratic socialists, which is I don't know if you can go any more crazy than that. Because even if I remember my history, and I'm fairly confident that I have done a good study on this, and I looked at the Russian Revolution that happened with the initial writings of Lenin, the fight against the proletariat, the czars, the Romanov dynasty. His brother had died in the revolution against them, and so he reluctantly gets in. And Lenin's manifesto actually is fairly decent in terms of its desire to take away from the oppressive people who were brutalizing the Russian people and give a percentage of the spoils of the labor to the people who were working. And then along comes Stalin, and he says, if a little power corrupts, a lot of power can corrupt absolutely, and he begins to wrest complete control. And history says that Lenin did not want Stalin as his successor. Stalin seems to have wrested that. Lenin died 3 years or 4 years right after the revolution, and Stalin's reign of terror began and lasted for a long, long time. I've looked at that, and I thought to myself, would I have ever imagined that someday in America we would be debating these issues, that they would look at this land that has been such a welcoming haven, a home for so many people, that they would leave the dust ravaged streets of their own war torn countries, completely devoid of any kind of infrastructure. When you go through some of these countries, and I have, you will see completely im, demolished structures. Parts of Zimbabwe after Robert Mugabe, and when you look at Yemen or Syria, um, look at the news for some of the other countries, and you will see what they have run from. Then you come here and you start walking through Frisco, Texas. You go through McKinney, Texas. You go through the suburbs of Houston. They're not as war torn, but some of the structures being erected, some of the large scale buildings being built with those domes and minarets, some of the statues to gods of unknown heritage that are being prayed to on large complexes that are 50 acres plus. And then you realize something, the shift. Not only did America welcome them in, not only did America give them the rights, not only did America give them residency, not only did America give them the right to vote, America gave them the haven to continue to import others in their family just because they now were here. Very few countries have such a lax immigration process where you come and 5 years later your entire clan can follow you. Well, that's what's happened. When you look at these big pockets in Minneapolis, the Silicon Valley, go to Fremont, California, and see if you recognize whether this Fremont is anything what John Fremont envisioned when the city was named after him much later, or when he and Carson found California on behalf of that gallant expedition. See, when I look through the lens of American history and I look through the eyes of Lady Liberty, I weep. I weep because in a short 250 years since independence, in a short 120 years since the great migrations of Europe prior to World War I, in the last 80 years since the Great Haven after World War II, this country has allowed many people to come in, unfettered, unchecked, just to give them hope, because that's what America is. America stands for hope in some ways. These same people probably dreamt of a better life, but then there's a fringe element in everything. They come in, they radicalize, they mobilize, they institutionalize, they indoctrinate, and before you know it, they dominate. When the police chief of Dearborn, Michigan, can talk in the way he talks, when the mayor of Minneapolis can talk the way he talks, and you realize Michigan, the home of Ford, the industrial capital of America, Detroit. Look at Texas, the buckle of the Bible Belt, the home of some of the great ministries that have taken change to the world. And we are on the cusp of absolute abandonment. The mockery of the city council in McKinney, Texas. All of these things that are happening at such a rapid pace. My friends, the time has come to wake up. The left's Lariat of Lunacy has been so wide in its loop that somehow it managed to rope in such lunatics that even they thought once we catch them, we'd be better off releasing them. Now they have nothing. They make statements like, I know we may not be right, but we have to win. That's where we are. Hopefully, you'll join me again for the next episode I do, and hopefully, they'll air back to back. This is Krish Dunham, filling in for my dear friend Todd Huff on the home of Conservative Not Bitter. Until next time, God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.